What's up, WonderCon? This is the heavy metal panel. We have Denton Tipton, I guess, what would you call the editor-in-chief of Magma Comics under heavy metal?
We're calling it publisher of Magma Comics. But
Love it. Publisher. I actually don't think I'd ever come up with a title before, so I'm going with publisher. I like that. Overlord, also. I love using Overlord.
No, I'll leave that to David Irwin.
We have Tommy Coriale of Diga Studios and Heavy Metal's head of TV and film. We have Blake Northcott, writer of Synapse, both in Wonderwork and in Heavy Metal, and of Arena Mode. We have a ton of awesome news coming out on that today. George C. Romero, the godfather of zombies and all things dark and scary and everything that I love about horror. And the Steve Orlando, writer of Heavy Metal's first YA comic series, Starward. Some other awesome things happening with the magazine. Welcome, everyone. How are we all doing? Oh, and I'm Matt Medney, the CEO of Heavy Metal.
There it is.
Awesome. What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Hello.
So, I mean, I want to start with The Rise because to me, with the news coming out in the last week, and obviously for people watching this, just to preface, because as all of us write science fiction, fantasy, and horror, keeping the time scale of when this is coming out and our conversations is just silly. So we're going to mention today that this comes out 30 days from now. So things that we talk about are relevant to the last week of February. So, Zack Snyder came out with a new Night of the Living Dead spinoff. Right, George? And we saw the trailer and we talked about it a little bit. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, what it feels like, both from a point of view that, your father created something that even in his, afterlife, people still want to reimagine, and how for you, what you're doing with Heavy Metal and with Romero Pictures with The Rise is kind of setting the stage for what zombieism will be once that comes to fruition. Because for me, when you pitched it to both Tommy and I, and how it's this prequel that sets the playground for what zombieism should be, to me is the most exciting thing about what's coming out with it. So, George, tell me a little bit about how you feel about all the things that have transpired this week.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I'm looking forward to watching that. What's it called? It's
I don't know what it's
Army
called.
of the Dead, I think
Zack
it's
Snyder
called.
and Zombies.
Army of the Dead, yes.
Yeah. So I am looking forward to watching it. I love action movies, and obviously I think everybody knows how I feel about the subject matter. But it's interesting because that was a couple of pretty big questions there, so I'll try to keep it short.
I was hoping you wouldn't. That's why I gave you a few big questions.
Well, this is one of the big things, right? Is that I don't know what those guys did in 1968. I think it had a lot of unintended side effects, right? That were phenomenal. And for a lot of years and a long time, after the original film ended up in the public domain, that had to be hard, right? Like that had to be hard. That had to lay like some mix on their minds. And at the end of the day, I think it's all about perspective. And I think what they did unknowingly was create sort of like this open source world, right? They created this brand new kind. It wasn't brand new. We'd seen zombies in films prior, but they took that and they came up with this new recipe, and they created this open source kind of creature that became a staple. And I think one of the things that made it become such a staple was that it became the kind of thing where if you knew how to find those guys, if you knew how to find the people that all worked together in Pittsburgh back then, most of them were willing to teach you what they knew. And so that created kind of this underground street cred of like where you go to learn how to make zombie makeup and where you go to learn how to do certain things like that. And that kind of just took off, and it became this perfect little playground where creatives of all types, from writers to singers to, Like there's people that write their doctorate thesis documents on Night of the Living Dead and on zombie apocalypse and things on the zombie apocalypse and things like that. That's not a small thing that we're talking. That's not a small entry into pop culture that we're talking about. And I think that it's because, like anything that really catches on, it empowered its own fans.
Totally.
And it was made with love for fans of horror, and it was made back then. I think they were just trying to make something nobody had ever seen before, and they wanted to kind of push the boundaries, and all of that kind of was like this perfect storm of creativity, especially with the time period that it came out. And then it became this place where people could go, they could write, they could practice their special effects, they could grab an 8mm camera and some oatmeal and go in the backyard and make backyard zombie movies. And that turned into this beautiful kind of monster that is still with us today. And I think that just like everything, there's stuff that's canon, right? Like, with vampires, you've got the sunlight, you've got, depending on what you read, you've got sunlight, garlic, wooden stakes, the whole thing, right? It's like these rules. And while rules were never really super established, people have latched on to certain rules about zombies and about the undead and everything and about what my dad called ghouls that they've stuck with for over 50 years now. And, I remember growing up, and I think that that's where the rise comes from, is I remember growing up having a little bit of a different perspective, because when I would spend time with my dad and we would talk about stuff, I would get a different version. I think I would get the dad version. And, a lot of questions that he still had and a lot of things that he used to talk about wanting to still address and everything like that. And I didn't realize till years later that all that was going to kind of swirl around into another perfect storm that was the rise. And then I had no idea that was going to take 10 years of, fighting to keep it true to what I think it needs to be. So.
We could do a whole panel on some of those stories. And I don't know if you know this, George, and maybe I'm dropping a bomb for you right now, but when this panel comes out, the cover to Heavy Metal 305 will be announced, which is the James Denton The Rise cover that we worked on last year. So that comes out right around when this panel will be launched. So, Joe and Jeremy, do your magic and put an image of that right on the screen, and we'll use that here. And, speaking of, stories that used to be dangerous, right? Because that to me is the pinnacle of what, from what I understand from you, is what your dad was doing was and effectively the way you just said it, something that I realized is he created a DIY YouTube for zombieism before there was a YouTube, with all of these filmmakers making zombie films in their backyards. It's effectively what YouTube is today back in the 70s. Just pretty amazing. And, kind of transversing from there is our heavy metal homegrown zombie story, Cold Dead War, which we had the honor of having you pen as well. And that will be released. I think issue 1 comes out right around when this panel launches. What was it like, for me, writing 2 zombie stories at the same time that are very different would be extremely hard. So, kind of talk us through quickly what that process was.
That was a lot of actually messaging with you and going into the kitchen or the wood shop and making something completely unrelated to what I was trying to do, because I remember even a conversation with you about just keeping the 2 worlds separate was it was a bit of a challenge, because what's interesting about both of them is that they're both set against these alternate realities, and there's crossover from the time period. So it was really kind of tricky to kind of just keep those focuses separate and keep the missions of both stories separate. But I think once we zeroed in on the core of what the Cold Dead War is really going to focus on, I think that's when it became a lot. It became a lot easier, because I've spent so long in the Rise and developing so much of that, and so many of these different kind of things that I think Tommy's going to talk about around it, that it was I'd be writing Cold Dead War, and all of a sudden some Rise would creep in, and I'd have to a lot of times I would text you, or I'd call my wife and say, hey, does this sound like the Rise? And she'd say, yeah. I'd be like, You know?
The ability to split the ethoses of them and make sure that it wasn't just repetition within the genre. I think is I remember, to your point, you would like text me a picture of like some epic guitar or watch or some outrageous thing of craftsmanship that you had built when you were trying to disconnect the two worlds as like a medium to space out. And you're like, yeah, I made this like record player. And I was like, why? And you were just like, I needed to separate the worlds. And I was like,
Yeah.
I wish I had that skill set.
Well, and it's interesting too, because they're such cool, unique worlds. And I really think that I don't know, once we clearly identified kind of the bubble, the Twilight Zone theory of the story bubble, right? Like the second you hear that first note of the Twilight Zone theme, you're in the bubble and you stay there till they let you out. Once I kind of identified the parameters of the bubble for the Cold Dead War story, I think that everything kind of started really kind of clicking into place. And then it was just a matter of just trying to, well, like you said, separate everything. And I do that a lot by other creative things. So.
I couldn't agree more. Now, I want to be cognizant of not taking up the entire panel, just talking about stuff together, because that's what the Indie Brigade is for. Whenever we come on and we realize 3 hours later that we just started, I want to transition for a minute to Denton, because for me, your story last year was pretty incredible. Spent 10 plus years at IDW, right, as managing editor, and you left, and within 2 months of leaving, we were able to forge this partnership to give you your own voice, Magma Comix, where now this year we have at least 3 titles coming out: Modern Frankenstein, Chasing Dragons, and Amber Blake. And all 3 titles, I'm excited about. And Tommy, we'll talk about that soon and what we've looked at with them. But Denton, can you give us a little bit of a peek into what that time period was like for you when you decided that you were going to move on and start looking at other opportunities? And I remember there was a couple of things that were bubbling, and what made you decide to go this way, and how excited are you about, Modern Frankenstein and Chasing the Dragon, and later this year, Amber Blake, which, has a great tie-in to heavy metal because your artist, Butch Geis, redrew Tarna for the first time in years for heavy metal before he started working on Amber Blake. So the electricity and the symbiosis of all the people involved before we had even decided to work together was just so palpable. So I'm curious, how did it all feel for you coming together?
Yeah, it was amazing convergence of all these things that kind of led to this. And it was a rough time early in COVID times, and I lost my father during that time as well, and couldn't go attend the funeral, so I was going through a lot there, and left IDW, was deciding what I wanted to do. I had a 2-year-old son, which was my motivation, and I really just came to the conclusion I loved making comics, and that kind of was my purpose, and that's how I can make the world a better place, as cornball as it sounds. So I just kind of followed that, and I'd worked in licensed comics for so long, and I enjoyed the creation, working with the creators, making stories, crafting stories. So that's kind of became my focus. And I had been working on Chasing the Dragon as a pitch for years with my artist, Minton 3. And I started pitching that to Tim Seeley, the editor-in-chief at Heavy Metal. And, he responded to it, liked the idea. And then separate from that, Jade Lagardère, who wrote and created Amber Blake, was looking for someone to help develop that and find a new publisher. And since I already had a relationship with them through Glenat, who had licensed that to IDW, they reached out to me, and I was happy to help Jade, bring that back, and I, just told Tim about it. I was like, oh, by the way, while we're talking Chasing the Dragon, I'm going to be representing Amber Blake now. I'm going to bring Butch back into the fold, and we're going to do a third book. And he's like, like you said, Butch was already working on Tarna. So he kicked me up to Matt, and Matt started talking to me about both. He liked both stories, wanted to do both, and is like, well, you could do so much more with your background. Why don't you start an imprint with us? And I was like, well, okay, it's easy. And it never is easy. It's just, luck is, being prepared for the opportunity when it arises, and there I was, and it's worked out great. Chasing the Dragon #1 came out in February. Amber Blake's coming out. Operation Dragonfly is the third book. We'll be doing that, coming out soon. And Modern Frankenstein, the Modern Frankenstein, by Paul Cornell and Emma Vicelli, will be coming out at the end of April. So we're right in the thick of it right now.
I love it. And, something that you and I both share, which I'd love to hear your take on, is having, an idea and a property and, being fortunate enough to be in a position where you can realize it. For you, Chasing the Dragon, for me, it was Darkwing and Beyond Kuiper. But for the people watching, what was it like for you for a project that you've thought about and had an artist for years, and being able to now have a vehicle and an avenue to bring it to realization? Like, what is that like?
It's an amazing feeling. I have been wanting to do that for years, and I wanted to write more. I've done a little bit here and there, but full-time job.
Full disclosure, a little bit of writing. You did write Star Trek book, and you have written X-Files book, correct?
Yeah, I've not Star Trek. No Star Trek. I've done edited Star Wars for years in Star Trek, but never did get published on those. Did X-Files, Cobra Kai, which was a lot of
properties.
Yeah, so a lot of other people's properties, exactly, and that's what I edited mostly.
I think that's a good distinction, right? Is for people watching, as cool as it might sound to write, Mulder, or to, write Cobra Kai, and to be in these worlds. For you, it was more liberating to finally get the idea that you had birthed to paper, right?
Absolutely. It's a personal story that, I wanted to tell, and it's just something I'd been putting off, and, to be free to be able to pursue that is great. And then, actually making it happen and holding it in your hands is just, a feeling like no other.
I love it. Yeah, no, I mean, it is a amazing story. I remember when you first sent it to me, if you remember, and you had showed me all three, I had told you that you should push Chasing the Dragon first out of all of them before we even had a publishing schedule for them and figuring out where the timeline was in getting the assets created. I'd always thought that was the strongest one we had. I thought the concept and the property and the passion, it brings me to, how I felt the first time I read the pitch for Sun Eater, was that there's such a personal story that, there's such an edge to that when the story is designed from a perspective of, personal experience. And you feel that when reading Chasing the Dragon.
Right, man, that's a great compliment. Yeah, because you always want to hear that is coming through and what you're aiming for. And this one, I don't think there's anyone that has been affected by substance abuse, whether drugs, alcohol, what have you. And, we've been undergoing an opioid crisis, you've heard, over the past few years. And it's only been exacerbated by the pandemic. So, it means a lot to have this story out there that shows the struggle with addiction, and that it can be overcome, and just to get it out there and have people talk about it, and, break some of the stigma surrounding it.
I love it. And because, we're heavy metal and we love to subvert expectations, because we're talking about a story that's very much centered around drug abuse and really serious problems. Let's jump to Steve and talk about a YA children's story, because I think that's just the perfect transition. So Steve, we met, I think it was probably last June, somewhere around there. And was it Tim or Joe that had connected us?
Probably Tim, because we've known each other for a long time.
And with yours, something that we hadn't, I don't think I've ever told you, is when you had sent over those 4 pitches, our biggest problem was figuring out which one we wanted to do, because we really liked all of them. And then, because I'm obsessed with anything God related, be it Odin, Thor, or Greek mythology, I went for the one that, was based in a lot of God-like mythology, which is Starward. And, for me, the idea of heavy metal publishing a story that could get people in the age ranges of like 9 to 15 exposed to heavy metal as a wide.
Yeah, the stories that people 9 to 15 probably shouldn't be reading, but will read anyway is really
that's the best stories. If you don't read the stories that you shouldn't read at 9 to 15, you're not going to develop the way you should.
Hey, I saw Terminator 2 at age 7, and look how I turned out. So.
I saw Halloween in 5th grade and had to have my mom sit in my bedroom with me for 3 years every night to go to bed because I thought Mike Myers was in the closet. So
it's totally reasonable.
But to the point, with Starward and this, why a female focused story, that is, really, in my opinion, pushing the boundaries of what heavy metal is, of what storytelling is for that age range. Talk to me about what you thought about when you're creating it. And, as we paired you with Ivan Chavron, those pages look amazing. And tell me how you feel about the whole story.
Yeah, so Starward came about largely, an idea I started working on when I was on the back end of working on Wonder Woman. And, there's a lot of, I wanted to work on those types of stories and be a little more unbridled. There's a lot of mazes to go through when you're working on a character that's 80 plus years old and has to, be on lunchboxes and things like that. But doing something new and existing in that sort of cosmic mythology space was really interesting to me, and building a world from the ground up. You're always dealing with the existing canon when you're working on a character that's really old. It is a privilege to do it, but then you eventually sort of yearn for something with a little more space to go wild in as well. So Starward is, you had hinted at it. It is broadly heavy metal's version of young adult. We're dealing, which is to say, it is definitely dealing with folks, between 17 and 22 are leads, but it is still heavy metal, so it's still going to be subversive. It's still going to make you question the world around you, and it's still going to push boundaries. And that was sort of the through line for me. It's about, first of all, Stephanie Cohen, who's just turning 20, and when she turns 20, this life that she's been leading reconnects with something that she didn't know that she was part of until that very moment. After 20 years, she connects with this greater cosmic life she has, where she realizes that her and 6 other people aren't just folks living in 2021, but they're also the reincarnations of these cosmic sisters that fought this battle before time and space even started. And because they exist outside of time and space, that battle was for them, hours ago. But as they fall through reality, centuries and centuries have passed, and they wake up in these lives and find out that the past 20 to 25 years that they've lived are just an episode in this greater saga that has been their lives. And the issue with that time that's passed is that the enemy, Chaos, who's already killed their father, Atlas, and kicked them out of Celestia, which is our version of heaven. I mean, he won 2,000 years ago. Well, they were falling. Chaos already took over, and so they're fighting a losing battle from the start. But that doesn't mean that they're going to not fight it. They're going to fight even harder. So you have 7 people just in the cusp of adulthood, like I was between those ages, and like we all are. But they're not just on the cusp of adulthood. They're on the cusp of godhood, and trying to figure out all of the sort of mess that goes along with that, and kick Chaos out of reality and give us a fighting chance.
It's so great because it it pulls on, for me, what is my favorite part about science fiction, which is what I call, and Tommy has heard this 1,000 times, is the Gene Roddenberry effect, which is making it just far enough away from your reality that you can look at the trials and things that the characters go through from a different lens than your own, and then be able to take those lessons and implement them in your life, because there's just enough separation that you're not feeling too connected to it, but it still relates to everything that's going on in your life. And that kind of the godhood aspect of it gives it that separation that I feel you need to be able to really feel the changes that are happening.
And that's I think the perspective on those concepts is a lot of what the heavy metal of it all offers. I've worked in a lot of different canons, and it's very easy to look at a character like our villain Chaos, or look at a character like, I don't know, like the personification of Death at Marvel or Darkseid at DC, and be like, oh, everything would be better if we just beat the god of evil. But in the real world, we know it's not that simple. And so I think it would be great if it was, but it's not. And so the obligation of heavy metal is to think about those things a different way. And I think that's what's poignant about this story in many ways. Like, the stakes it's not, the characters aren't fighting for a quick fix. It's not as though, they beat Ares at the end of Wonder Woman and suddenly you have Germans and English people hugging each other. Well, that's not reality.
Transversely, at the end of Endgame, you beat Thanos, but Iron Man dies. Right? That's
yeah. And so the characters realize, there's nothing so cute as like a switch to turn off and make people good. What they're fighting for is an even playing field. What they're fighting for is a fair shot at being good, and to not be living with one arm tied behind their back by this villain. And it's a subtle point, but I'm very proud of it, because we know more than ever in the current era, there's no one person there's no one villain to hit in the face. There's no one anything. It's a bigger effort, and we just need a fighting chance. And so I'm very proud of that point for this book. And you'd asked about Ivan. This book wouldn't exist without Ivan. The work he's doing is incredibly unique. And it really looks like unlike any other comic that I've worked on. I mean, I will admit, I wasn't sure how he was going to progress when you first showed him to me. It wasn't what I expected, but I trust you, I trust him, I trust Joe. And then as he got into the book and got into designing the characters and the world, every page is more creative than the last. His color work is incredible. It almost has, I believe he's working digital, but it has like a textural painted element that is super, super unique. And he's just an asset to the book. So it goes without saying that this is as much his book as mine. And I'm very, very proud to be working with him. And I'm not making it an easy book to draw.
I would agree with that.
It's challenging, but I'm very proud of that. And I'm very excited to see it start. Let's see, this is coming out in March. So to see it start this month and really have people see what we've been doing over here in the shadows, working on this book for the past year. But yeah. The challenge of making this heavy metal, when you guys first emailed that to me, it's like, these are younger characters. It can't be like Tarna, going for a naked swim to get her sword. It just can't and shouldn't. But what it can do is challenge notions. What it can do is make you question yourself and the world around you. And that's also part, to me, of the heavy metal brand. When you're punk rock, when you're counterculture, it doesn't just mean sex and death, though that's things we all like in fiction. It means looking at something a different way. It means what you thought you knew, maybe you should think about it in a new way. Maybe it's not what you thought it was all along. And so that's what I think we can do with this story. Like, it's not right to do certain things that are hallmarks of sort of like really pulpy science fiction because of the age group. But what we have to do is challenge the thought processes even more and be even more subversive, and show that those types of things are important on the minds of younger folks today.
Something that, you share with one of our other panelists here, Blake, is that, on both of your original scripts, one for Synapse and for you, Starward, we, on the editorial side, challenged it to be more heavy metal. And the edits that I had read back after those notes were unbelievable. Like, I have never worked with creatives who were able to just literally take a line, make it more heavy metal. And then what I read back was exactly what I mean. I said so little, but meant so much, and you guys got it. And it was so cool. And, I think that's a great point to bring it over to Blake. And I would love to talk about Synapse, right? Because that was an amazing story that we were able to parlay with Tommy and Diga into a wonderwork. But it started off as a pitch for a one-off short in the magazine and is now a quarterly 6-pager. So tell me about what it was like to pitch that and then start working on that with, Giuseppe, Brian, and Frank and the whole team that's working on it.
Yeah, it's been an incredible experience working with you, Matt, and the whole heavy metal team. Just incredible. So Synapse is a cyberpunk story, obviously, that takes place in Toronto. It's about, a corporation that develops products to help you escape from reality. But in the real world, they're causing most of the damage that people want to escape from. It's
really real.
Yeah, and it's this. Yeah, of course. And we call the Hexen House Corporation is the common thread that appears in every story, and even in the Wonderwork story that we did for Organic Bliss. But what inspired the story for me was really the aesthetic. Seeing something like Cyberpunk 2077, this video game that's announced a few years ago. I just fell in love with the concept art, and I'm such a visual person that, that became a real starting place for me to think about in terms of theme and storytelling technique. I also love the idea of the future being dominated by technology, since it's kind of feels relevant in the trajectory we're kind of headed at the moment. So that all kind of came together in Synapse.
Yeah, I remember reading the pitch, and the first thing I thought was, who the bleepin' wrote this? And I started researching you, and I started reading about what you did with Arena Mode and with Kickstarter, and how it was the best performing Canadian book Kickstarter ever, right? And after we started working on Synapse, I started wondering, what can we do more together? And we came to this idea of republishing Arena Mode with a new cover that we can, show for the first time ever here. Joe, Jeremy, do your magic. It's going to show up, even though we're not seeing it right now. And after we started putting together kind of those notes of how we're going to republish it, we brought Tommy in, who's, kind of the silent assassin in the corner. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff in a moment here, Tommy. But, I think something that'd be really great to talk about here is that, you and I really connected with Arena Mode and what the story was and how it could be relatable in adaptation form. And, kind of in a WonderCon exclusive here, where we're actually in developments now about the property. And Tommy, do you want to kind of give a little insight as to what you thought when you first, saw the pitch that I had given you on it, and seeing if it was something that made sense to kind of work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me on a panel full of creators where I don't belong. But I am so lucky that I get to work with all of you guys, and I pinch myself. Matt knows this, that I get to be the guy that helps shepherd, the heavy metal brand off the page. Seeing Arena Mode for the first time, I mean, the kind of cascade of possibilities that went through my head when I originally, heard the pitch and then got to meet Blake and really get a little bit more under the hood on it. Working on heavy metal projects, right? I think we talk about the tone and what you expect from heavy metal. Arena Mode was everything I didn't expect, but it still made sense. And then, this past couple months, kind of kicking the ball around as to what it could be off the page and how to make it stand out, because it is different and it is unique. People could pull little threads and say, oh, it's like this or it's like this, but there's really so much about it that is so unique. Being able to allow also Blake to kind of drive that process. One of the things that I take great pride in as an exec is knowing that I'm not the smartest creative in the room. So being able to pitch back just what I like about it and what I feel are the strongest tenets of it to translate to, we're talking about it as a television series. and then allow Blake to go back and do her thing. And every draft that we've gotten back of the pitch pages has been, more interesting, more unique, more dynamic, more 3D than I even expected to be after reading the original material. And everything is in there from the original material, but Blake's kind of vision for how to bring it to the page, what to highlight, how to take the human element and the relationship elements and outside of the arena mode elements, and make them as important as the ridiculous action that's happening inside the arena, has been just an absolute pleasure. And, obviously having Matt kind of continue to be the guide on making sure that it feels heavy metal. Again, Matt gives that note, and then somehow, some way, Blake, you come back every time with it perfectly articulated and expanded upon. So, we are very, very excited. I think we are at the point now, if we're talking about it out in the open, where we feel really, really confident about the series pitch that we have in place. And we're now starting to talk about, who might be the right partners to actually go and, bring it out to market and start talking to, distributors and people to get this thing paid and made. So more on that to come, hopefully, in the coming months. But again, I can't overemphasize, how much you've knocked it out of the park, Blake, and how much it's been a pleasure watching you do it.
Wow. Thank you, Tommy. You're making me blush here. It's been wonderful working with you and Matt and Patrick as well. I really feel like you guys, you say you're not part of the, creative one on the team, but like your insights into helping me kind of like draw out from the characters what you need in terms of emotional, impact and making those scenes just better for the creative process has been really incredible. And your guidance, and Matt and Patrick as well, has been inspirational. So I'm so thankful to have you in my corner, and it's been incredible. I'm having a blast. So much fun. I just wanted to say really quickly, I've always had this like passion for television and film, and that really informed the style of writing that I had with arena mode. So ever since it came out, readers have been asking me, when am I going to see it on the big screen? So this feels like a very natural progression to me, coming kind of full circle now. And even from the planning phase, the story always felt in my mind like it was going to be a series. So this is a dream come true.
I love it. And with, some of your other writings, like what we were talking about with Synapse, Tommy, we, developed the WonderWork construct right at the beginning of the pandemic. And it wasn't even necessarily because of the pandemic, but it quickly became an outlet for us to tell stories that we were maybe unable or thought might be too risky to develop into a comic or into a graphic novel or into a prose novel when 70% of bookstores were closed for a time being, or comic shops were just all on a halt. We had figured out this medium to tell those same stories, but through audio, right? From my point of view, I came up with the idea kind of on my own, and then Patrick and you kind of shaped it with us, and then we brought it to the market. But what, from your point of view, when you first heard the pitch for WonderWork, what were you thinking?
16 pieces of IP I get to play with. No, to your point, right? Well, let me rewind a little, right? So, this relationship started because, as the head of a production company that does as much as we were doing at the time, I felt like it was essential to have a dedicated partner in IP. Both for a pipeline of pre-existing stuff, but also almost more excitingly to do new stuff with together. Tony DeSanto, who's the CEO of Diga, started when I first started there 6.5 years ago, was publishing books based on original ideas to reverse engineer IP. And so that was my entry point. And I was really excited about that. And we started this relationship January or February of 2020, right? Then both of our businesses, to Matt's point, the print business and the television production business, basically shut down. And at the same time, this opportunity was popping up where Matt was starting to kick around the idea of doing WonderWork. And we said, let's put as much of our kind of bandwidth that we now have freed up into this, because there's so much opportunity. The idea of working with, individual creators on every episode, was super attractive because, as you can see just from this panel, the amount of talent that heavy metal brings in and that it attracts is a friggin' gold mine, and we are just I'm wildly lucky to be associated with it. As we started hearing some of the pitches too of like, hey, we're working on this for the comic, this could be an interesting episode, or hey, we're just working with this really interesting writer, or Matt had stayed up till 4 a.m. the night before and had a crazy idea.
Right there. I don't know how StreamYard works, so I'm pointing in the direction. Steve, I appreciate that note earlier. That right there is Mortimer, which was one of the first Wonderwork episodes we created, and we were lucky enough to have Kai Carpenter, amazing painter, realize what Mortimer looks like as a piece of art. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I had a interject there.
It's indicative of what the opportunity brought, the medium of having these kind of movies for your ears, right? As the starting point it was perfect for each of the stories that we chose, I think. And then from that, Matt and his team have been able to start conceptualizing, a visual, true visuals to go along with it. And now, on a lot of these properties, we have visuals married with these movies for your ears. And then that's when I get to come in and play, and take those, out of your ears and off the page and into TV and film. So I'm obviously wildly excited about, the possibilities through all of those.
Building out universes through, right? I mean, even with George, we brought
that's what I was going to say,
right? And I mean, because of who George is and his friends, we had the original 21 Jump Street actor be the voice of Bluegrass, right? I mean,
yeah.
And that was just so amazing. And your voice contributions not only to Bluegrass but to Kuiper, to my audiobook. It's I Tommy and I jokingly say this to you, but seriously say it behind your back. We could just listen to you on a mic all day. It's just you have a way with captivating when talking about something that is just amazing. So having you do voice work has just been incredible. And
well, thank you. It was incredible. It was awesome to do it. It was so much fun. I love doing that kind of stuff. So, and it was just an honor. So, I mean,
we have a kind of top secret project in the works that when we put together a short sample of what it's going to be, and we had to figure out who the voice of heavy metal was going to be. That was a very quick conversation, and George knocked that right the F out of the park.
Oh my God, George! I remember Patrick came to me and said, "What do you think of George being this voice?" And I said, "What do you think about anyone else not being?" I was like, "There's no one else that should be that voice."
It was awesome. It was just unbelievable, and it was like a huge bucket list honor to do it too.
I love it, and talking, kind of using this panel to showcase not only what the creators of heavy metal are doing, but to also show that we don't just do one thing with a creator. We like to build with them. Another WonderCon kind of exclusive here is that Steve is shepherding the Halloween edition this year with a couple of his friends that is going to make a Halloween-esque horror edition of the Heavy Metal magazine. So Steve, why don't you talk about that for a minute, about it was something that you brought to me about 4 months ago, and me being slow, it's taken a while to get it moving, but your persistence is nothing but adored. And now we're in it. Now we have it ready to go, and calls are being done and plans are being made. And are you excited?
We're in it. You're regretting giving me your cell phone number every day. I understand. Can we can talk? We can say who it's with and everything.
Yeah, you do whatever you want. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, we will. Folks that follow me on social know that I'm a big fan and supporter of the Boulet brothers. Folks know them from their show on Netflix, Dragula. They're, I think, some of the most interesting and hardest working drag queens in the business, and also just experienced promoters. They and I have been talking about finding a way to collaborate for a long time. And as Matt said, we weren't sure exactly what it would look like. But they are huge comic book fans, and sci-fi horror fans, as you might imagine, when you do a show based around drag, horror, filth, and glamour. So when the idea came up about maybe doing a takeover of heavy metal, it was something that just felt right. Their style and heavy metal style is very analogous. They do a show that is about bucking tradition and sort of subverting what is in the mainstream and what is heavy metal about, if not pushing buttons. So in October, the Belays and I are going to be curating the Halloween issue of Heavy Metal. You're going to see stories from them and me. You're going to see stories from many of their peers. And it's just going to be a really special moment. Halloween, obviously, when you're a horror drag duo, is a big thing. I'm a huge fan of them and everything they do. So to be able to work with them and put out this Halloween issue, I couldn't be more excited. It's going to be lit. And hopefully it's going to be the start of something really big going forward.
I love it. And Steve, I don't think you and George are connected offline, but we'll make sure you're connected, because if you need any other horror stories for it, there is a vampire zombie cosmic story that I think we should totally make as a short, George, for it.
Hell yeah.
Done.
And another thing that could be interesting that I just realized is for season 3 of Wonderwork, which will be coming out this spring, let's do a Starward. Let's do a Starward Wonderwork. You down?
I am in. I'm down. We'll talk. I got some ideas.
Awesome. I love it. And all right, so as we start wrapping up here, because I was told to do 45 minutes, but I'm the CEO, so I'm going to do as long as I want. It's pretty fun. There's a few things I wanted to just talk about real quick. One is, Heavy Metal's relaunch of Tarna, which, written by Stephanie Phillips, is one of our favorite, let alone most successful relaunches of an IP that we've had. The first issue of the comic sold out within the first 2 weeks of it being on the shelves, which is pretty amazing. And, which may be an exclusive for WonderCon as well, or might already be announced, but the reprinting of that issue is going to have a cover from Peach Momoko, which is going to be pretty amazing. Again, Joe and Jeremy will do their magic, so the screen pops up with it, which is pretty amazing. And as Tarna finishes its 6-story arc, which will happen by the summer, we're going to be launching our main villain to Tarna, Entropy, which is written by Christopher Priest, who, if you're watching this and you like comics and you don't know who Christopher Priest is, just cancel out this panel and go look him up, because you should know who he is, just straight up. If
you look Fedora Milaje from Black Panther, Priest. Yeah. Among many other things.
Among many other things, but a prolific writer and creator in his own right. And we're really excited to have Chris writing Entropy. And with that, is there any final words from everyone on the panel? We'll start with Denton. Anything you want to plug real quick before we say bye?
Oh, wow. I would just like to talk a little bit more about the Modern Frankenstein. The writer is Paul Cornell. I've worked with him several times in the past, and every time we do it, it's a really special story, and usually gets recognition. One was nominated for a Hugo, and I think that was a Doctor Who story, and this one is one that he's created, and I think it's just as special as those, if not more. It's a complete retelling of Frankenstein tale set in modern times, and it's a twisted romance, a horror romance. So we're pushing some boundaries there with what some people associate with heavy metal. So that one I'm excited about, and that one comes out at the end of April.
I'm excited about it. Something that Tommy and I have talked about a lot is the something that Tommy's boss and CEO at Diga, Tony DeSanto, loves is the monster universe and retelling stories with the the Draculas and the Frankensteins and all of that. So when you came to me with Modern Frankenstein, it's like the first thing I threw in front of Tommy from you, because there's such a love for retelling monster stories in a unique and new way. So for everyone watching, Modern Frankenstein's a must to get your hands on. Absolute must. You know, for me, one more thing that, you know, love to talk about for a minute is Darkwing, which is a pretty great, I guess, you know, journey, because that story, you know, unlike some of the other ones I've written, which I wrote from the perspective of sitting down and wanting to write something and thinking of what could be interesting. You know, Darkwing was incepted when I was still touring in music and doing live events, and I was in Vegas at the Palms throwing a show, literally setting the stage on fire with pyrotechnics. And I'll never forget, like I shot off a round during a song, and literally the idea of a flying planet just hit me. And, you know, with everyone on here, Tommy included, and just the creators and the teams that we have at Heavy Metal, and being able to realize that, just like Denton, you were able to realize Chasing the Dragon has just been, you know, an amazing experience. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you. But yeah, Darkwing, you know, is one of those stories that brought some validation. You know, there's a showrunner attached to it who we will not name on this WonderCon for courtesy, since it's not public yet. But when he read the script and decided to, you know, jump on to help produce it, that was a pretty cool feeling. And like Blake, with you, it gave me that same sense of like excitement when somebody else really connected to something that you created. It's an amazing feeling, right? It's just like the best thing possible. And George, I think, you know, we had that when you pitched me The Rise for the first time. And Tommy, right? We were all on it together. And, you know, for everyone watching, I think it's important to know that we're not just a group of people that are creating stuff together. We're also friends, right? We've created these friendships from being able to create together. I mean, George and Tommy and I have a text thread that started off as the Rise text thread to talk about strategy. It has effectively become a food porn thread. Right? All we do is text each other back meals that we've made. It's unbelievable. And, you know, I think that's a great, you know, motif for what it takes to be a great creator and to be a great partnered creator, is that it's not always about, you know, is this cool or should I go in this direction? But it's about like caring about the people that you're working with and how you're working with them and what you're doing with them, you know, and being able to, you know, have that humanity while also figuring out ways to push narratives in a direction that can impact other people. And I think that's what we're doing at Heavy Metal. And, you know, I'm already at this point 8 minutes over. I'm just waiting for Joe or Jeremy to just shut me off. So instead of that, I will wrap us up here, and want to thank WonderCon, thank all of you guys for coming on. And if there's any last minute things, you know, blurt it out now. If not, you know, check out Starward, check out Chasing the Dragon, check out Mon Frankenstein, check out Amber Blake, you know, check out Arena Mode and Synapse and The Rise and Cold Dead and Tarna and Darkwing, and realize how many awesome properties are coming out of Heavy Metal from the entire coalition of creatives that we have. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.